I guarantee a fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford would be a crowd-pleasing banger of a fight if it were to happen. Because while some mega fights between the two absolute best end up in slow methodical chess matches that the average viewer won't appreciate, like Mayweather versus Pacquiao, other times it ends up as an unforgettable, action-packed turn-off-your-brain clash like Hagler versus Hearns. In other words, there's this old quote that goes something like, "Styles make fights," or something like that. I believe it was Ted who said that. And for those mouth breathers who don't believe me, the reason I say this is because when challenged with adversity, both guys respond by taking the fight to their opponents. So let's first take a look at Terence Crawford in his fight against Mean Machine. Mean Machine came out with what seemed to be a game plan of slowly pressuring Crawford from a distance and patiently waiting for exact moments where he senses Crawford is taking a mental break so that he could sneak in a jab to the body. By round 2, Crawford tried countering this with a right hook, but Mean Machine was ready for this as he was able to push off of his lead foot to pull away from the counter right hook from Crawford. In the first 3 rounds, Crawford didn't counter a single body jab, and once he was conditioned to defend the body jab, it allowed Mean Machine to land the right hand that hurt Crawford. So let's break it down and pay attention to what Terence Crawford does. As both guys are in the neutral, we see Crawford shows his lead hand. He shows his lead hand again. It's obviously coming short. You see he leans to his left, then here he leans to his right. Then he does a little bit of a level change here. And we notice that Crawford in the neutral has already shown multiple looks in relatively quick succession. And this is one of Terence Crawford's best skills. And it also plays a big part in how he prevents his opponents from walking in and punching him. By showing a different look, he essentially threatens a different attack, which gives his opponent something to think about, which in turn causes him to stop and assess the situation instead of attacking. The more Crawford is able to make his opponents think with these looks, the more he can slow down the pace of the fight and then dictate the pace on his own terms once he figures out the holes in his opponent's defense exposed by the reactions they give to his multiple looks. However, Mean Machine knows that eventually the looks will stop, if only for a moment, and Crawford will eventually have to take a momentary break, as it's pretty mentally tiring to be focusing on constant movement and having each counter at the ready during those movements. He'll need to take a mental break, and Mean Machine senses this moment as his opportunity as Crawford stands still for just a moment and begins to show his lead hand again. Mean Machine reads it and times this body jab at the same time. And you notice Crawford isn't ready to counter.
You just said it. You know, he's going to take his time. He's going to box on the out.
Equal skills from both stances.
That's exactly what he's...
Heisman night here.
So like I said, it wasn't until the second round when Crawford even attempted to counter the body jab. And take a look at what Mean Machine does in this sequence. In the last clip, we saw how he set up the jab with patience, but here we're going to see that he actually uses patience and distance to set it up. Look here as he's pressuring forward, but also remains outside of Crawford's reach at the same time. Crawford has his arm fully extended here, and Mean Machine is still outside of its range. The thing is, by staying outside of range, it goes without saying, it lowers the chance of Crawford hitting him. And since Mean Machine's game plan is centered around this body jab, the body jab is one of the few punches that will actually cut that distance. So as you can see, Mean Machine is pressuring forward, but is remaining patient enough to stay outside of Crawford's punching range. He's looking for his moment to cut the distance with that body jab, and he takes this moment, since Crawford isn't showing many looks, to shoot that body jab, and notice he pushes off of his lead foot to avoid the counter right hook from Crawford. Beautiful. And we're going to see the same thing in this sequence here. Mean Machine is pressuring forward while patiently remaining outside of Crawford's punching range. Then he finds the moment to shoot the body jab, pulls away from the counter right hook, and as Crawford gets impatient, bam, bam. And one more clip, we see that Mean Machine is patiently waiting outside of Crawford's punching range. He's looking for a moment to shoot that body jab. So here we're about to see him shoot the body jab, and he pushes off of his lead foot to shut down Crawford's counter right hook. You notice how Crawford doesn't even shoot it, and he can't even shoot a straight left hand to reach him. So now Mean Machine level changes again as though he's throwing another body jab, but this time it's a feint. He conditioned Crawford to expect the body jab, and this time he loads up to make it look like another body jab is coming, but comes up the top with a right hand. And you notice Crawford drops both his hands to protect against a body jab that never came, and this leads to him dropping down to a knee. So now Crawford is facing some adversity with a guy who has formulated a game plan against him and is executing it perfectly. So how does Crawford respond to this? Well, he realizes all of this offense from Mean Machine stems from the long-range body jab, so since he hasn't been able to counter the body jab, he decides to prevent it entirely by stepping into punching range with Mean Machine and fighting with him. And this is the whole point of this video. When Crawford faces a challenge, he takes the fight to his opponent, which leads to entertaining fights. From a tactical standpoint, it also works here since the shorter distance means the counter right hooks that Mean Machine was pulling away from at long distance will now reach him, and for almost the rest of the fight, Mean Machine never throws any more body jabs while Crawford is pressing forward. You see here, Mean Machine can't possibly throw a body jab at this range because it's going to get clipped by a counter right hand, or he's going to get clipped by something, so now they're just slugging it out. Now this brings me to Errol Spence, who has also shown to ramp up the action when he faces tactical adversity, and in his fight with Shawn Porter, Spence was looking to dictate the pace with his constant jab that he uses against all of his opponents. However, Porter had an answer to this. You see, Porter is the type of fighter who bounces, builds a rhythm, and springs in and out with his attacks. This style has an inherent weakness, where your opponent can get a feel of your rhythm and time you off of it. Notice how Porter is bouncing here, building a rhythm. He's bouncing back and forth at a set rhythm, and Spence could see this. Spence could get a feel of their rhythm and time his jab on Porter's bounce in to catch him. Except the genius of Porter's strategy was that this whole thing was a bait for Spence to throw his jab. Porter knows when he's vulnerable, and when he's vulnerable is most likely when the punch from Spence is coming. So Porter purposely allows Spence to get a feel of his rhythm, opens himself up for a jab, and then attempts to counter the jab when it comes. He doesn't land here, but it's a very good attempt. And you see the same thing here, even as he's moving back, Porter's building a rhythm, baiting out that jab from Spence, and once the jab comes, Porter blitzes forward with a counter and chases Spence down. And one more time, Porter's giving Spence a feel of his rhythm, and when the jab comes, Porter counters it with a right hand. So essentially, Porter has taken away one of Spence's best weapons, and what is Spence going to do here? Of course, Spence takes the fight to Porter, and instead throws punches on his own timing instead of trying to time Porter, since Porter was walking him into traps. Spence also ramped up the pressure in an effort to push Porter to the ropes, where he wouldn't be able to get his bouncing rhythm going, and this led to situations where Porter was able to reverse Spence, giving us the back and forth war that we got. And even in his most recent fight against Ugas, Ugas was prepared for Spence's jab and countered it with his own jab early in the fight. So how did Spence answer to this adversity? Well, he would jab, duck under the counter jab, then proceed to beat up Ugas on the inside all night. So to sum up this whole video, if Errol Spence vs Terence Crawford happens this year, I guarantee it will be a great fight. Both guys ramp up the action and turn it into a dogfight when they face a challenge in the ring, and there's little to no chance either guy won't pose any challenges for the other. Basically, it'll be so good, it'll make me want to beat my meat. Alright, I'm tired and this video needs to end. So thank you to all my GOAT tier patrons, Jason Maheenan, Grant Gabriel, Albert Chen, Jeff, Dmitry Drozdov, Andre, Gostalegeza, Mark Price, and Marshall Bott. You guys keep the channel going, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.